Well, good morning. Thank you for joining us today to learn about the Economic Development Allocation Pool for Private Activity Bonds. My name is Jason Mahone. I am the Deputy Secretary of Economic Development at Florida Commerce. At Florida Commerce, under the leadership of our Governor Ron DeSantis and Secretary Alex Kelly, we work to advance Florida's economy by championing the state's economic development vision and implementing initiatives that support our job seekers and job creators, as well as help our communities, workforce, and new and existing businesses thrive. Our comprehensive resources, services, and programs help our communities, businesses, and residents. A new resource that we have available this year is the Economic Development Allocation Pool. This is an allocation pool available through the Private Activity Bond Allocation Program. Right now, there is more than $759 million available in volume cap allocation in this pool for eligible projects as defined by the Internal Revenue Code. This funding is available from now through May 31st. The purpose of the webinar today is to solicit eligible projects to allocate the available volume cap, as well as provide additional information about the program and to answer any questions that we may have about how it will be administered. Joining me today in the room is Ben Latham, and we also have joining us Maureen Smith, who is our Bureau Chief of Business Development. At the end of the webinar, we will take questions and provide answers to you once we have completed a presentation. At this point, I'll turn it over to Maureen to provide that information about the program.
Thank you, Jason, and good morning. Welcome to the Economic Development Allocation Pool webinar. I want to thank everybody for joining us and just take a quick moment to let everybody know that the webinar is being recorded and the recording will be posted on our website in a few days. And as Jason mentioned, if you have questions throughout the webinar, just type them into the chat and we'll take time at the end to answer them. This webinar will provide you with an overview of the Economic Development Allocation Pool within the Private Activity Bond Program and will provide guidance regarding new changes to the program, how and when to apply. Private activity bonds are tax-exempt bonds used to finance specific facilities and projects for businesses as per the Internal Revenue Code. They're used to attract private investment for projects that have some public benefit. Local governments, industrial development authorities, housing finance authorities, and other authorized entities issue the bonds. And these entities are able to borrow on behalf of private companies and nonprofits, lowering borrowing costs for entities that might otherwise turn to corporate bonds or bank loans. Private activity bonds are issued to attract business and labor to an area in order to derive a public benefit, which may qualify the bond for tax-exempt status. Projects eligible for financing through private activity bonds may include those listed here. The Internal Revenue Code identifies the private activities that qualify, and these activities are called qualified private activities. The IRC further defines thresholds for the use of the bond proceeds and has other qualifying tests, and also identifies the types of projects that require an allocation of volume cap by the Division of Bond Finance. The federal government sets an annual limit on the amount of certain private activity bonds that can be issued in each state, known as the state volume cap. Congress uses an annual state volume cap to limit the amount of tax-exempt bond financing, but not all projects that qualify for private activity bonds are subject to volume cap. The Division of Bond Finance has determined the 2025 state ceiling for Florida will be over $3 billion in volume cap, and that's based on the U.S. Census Bureau's most recent state population estimate for Florida and the per capita multiplier established by the IRS of $130, which is an increase of $5 over last year. In Florida, the volume cap is distributed among statutorily created pools, with unused volume cap being redistributed throughout the year as required by Florida statute. This slide illustrates the private activity bond programs benefit and process. A private company benefits as they are able to finance a project at a lower rate than taxable corporate bonds or bank loans. The state or local government issuer benefits as they obtain local jobs and investments supporting the local community, and the bond buyer or investor is willing to accept a lower interest rate because the interest income is not subject to federal income taxes. Legislative changes enacted in 2024 modernizes, updates, and streamlined out-of-date provisions of the Florida Private Activity Allocation Program. Specifically, it refined and added definitions. It revised the regions, pools, and timelines related to bond allocations to consolidate infrequently used pools and expedite the usage of bonds. It replaced the existing process for requesting and granting allocation of volume cap with an electronic application. So now all notices and issuance reports will be submitted on DBF's website rather than sent by certified or overnight mail. And this new legislation took effect on January 1 of this year. This slide shows the volume cap allocation made by the Division of Bond Finance on January 1. Since then, allocations have been made from the regional affordable housing pool, so the pool allocation has been reduced. The DBF website has a list of allocations made so far this year. Also found on the website are key dates when these pools dissolve and any unused portion of state volume cap as it is transferred to the state allocation pool. It's important to note, and as Jason mentioned earlier, that there's nearly $760 million in volume cap available to the new economic development allocation pool. And that brings us to the economic development allocation pool. So the new legislation combined the purposes of the Florida First Business Bond Pool, the Manufacturing Facility Bond Pool, and the previous state allocation pool into the new Florida Economic Development Allocation Pool. And this pool is available from January 1 to May 31st for the Division of Bond Finance to issue confirmation for all private activity bonds except affordable housing. So that would include exempt facility bonds, small issue bonds, student loan bonds, and redevelopment bonds as defined in Section 159.803 Florida statutes. The Secretary of Commerce must prioritize economic development allocation pool volume cap applications received by the Division of Bond Finance before May 1st of each year, and applications will be reviewed on a rolling basis as received by the Division of Bond Finance. Applications for volume cap allocation must be submitted electronically via a notice of intent to issue through the new Private Activity Bond Program portal on the DBF website, and the address is here on this slide. Each notice of intent must include the listed items here, but just to point out a couple of the bullets, the TEFRA is short for the Tax Equity and Fiscal Responsibility Act, and the TEFRA approval means the approval of a proposed issuance of bonds by elected official or body of elected officials of the applicable governmental unit after a public hearing, or by referendum of the voters within such governmental unit. And that's required by Section 147F of the Internal Revenue Code. Note also that there is an opinion or statement of counsel that the project qualifies for private activity bonds and that an allocation of state volume cap is required and must be uploaded to the DBF website as part of that notice of intent. Additional information may be found on Division of Bond Finance's website, including the key program dates, allocation pool information, information on the utilization of volume cap, the availability, confirmations of allocations, pending notices of intent to issue, and any carry forward balance. So that concludes our formal presentation. I'm not sure if there's been any questions that have come through. But we can take a moment to gather those and be back to answer any questions in a moment. Our contact information is on this slide. If you have any questions regarding private activity bonds, economic development allocation pool, please don't hesitate to reach out we'd love to talk through any projects with you.
Thank you so much, Maureen, and thank you everyone for joining.